Our next presenter is Sergeant Tom Murdoch. Sergeant Murdoch was born in northern Quebec and moved to Halifax at 9 years of age. He is a married father of 3 boys. Sergeant Murdoch has been a member of the RCMP for over 23 years. His experience in the RCMP ranges from rural, First Nations, municipal policing in the provinces of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Nova Scotia. He has worked in the area of commercial crime, major crime, and the Atlantic Counterfeit Coordinator for the past 12 years. He holds a Bachelor of Science with a major in biology from St. Mary's and a Master of Business at Dalhousie. His hobbies include hockey in the winter, golf in the summer, and like many folks, transporting his kids to and from sporting events. Welcome, Sergeant Tom Murdoch.
Flicker up there?
Oh, he wants the flicker.
I'll try that, if I could. Ready to go? Does work? Okay. Thank you. You guys can hear in the back? Ready to go. First of all, thanks for having me here today, John. I really appreciate it. John approached me in December and said, would you like to be a part of this data group that we're having, Data Privacy Day? I said, well, I'm a cop. How am I going to help you out in this kind of regard? So my role is I'm in charge of counterfeit currency, and so for Atlantic Canada. So I go out and do a lot of presentations with respect to counterfeit currency. It's not a real major issue here in Atlantic Canada, to be truthful. Quebec, Ontario, it's more prevalent, as well as the West Coast. But we try to get in and do a lot of preventative stuff. So what happens is I end up doing a lot of presentations with respect to identity theft, payment card theft, things that are more prevalent here, to get in the door to get my message across. So my first real, encounter with identity theft was we're doing an investigation into counterfeit currency, and people had identity cards. So they were making counterfeit currency. They were also making social insurance cards, health cards, with various people's names on it. So in those days, approximately 8 years ago, when we went to something like this, the law, what we had at the time was, the big thing was possession of stolen property. It's just like if somebody had been shoplifting, stolen the data, or stolen something, an item, and we didn't really have any major mechanisms in place to charge it. It was felt, but the courts kind of took it upon as a possession of stolen property. It wasn't a major issue. That has changed, and I have a little bit of history with respect to that here in my presentation. We're going to cover off, here we go. This is what we're going to cover off today: identity theft and identity fraud definitions. Some Bill S4 offenses, that's what I'm speaking with. That happened in January 2010. New changes address that gap in the criminal code. We're going to talk about identity documents, the uses of the identity information, as well as identity fraud, and steps both consumers and organizations can take to minimize the effects of this. What we're talking about is risk management, and I'm sure you've heard that term throughout the day, and we're going to try to work and build upon those things, and hopefully have everybody be able to leave with a little something. So identity theft refers to the unauthorized collection or possession of the information, and the fraud is when that information is actually used and illegally. With respect to, I think it's a great analogy with respect to a payment card or skimming, is the unauthorized copying use of a debit card and collecting that data using surveillance techniques, pinhole cameras, and card readers, and obtaining the information, then placing it on embossed cards that they make to actually extract money from people's accounts. That's the way it's done. And so the actual theft is the taking of the data, and organized crime groups are doing this. And what they do is actually obtain the data, and they might even sell that to another organized crime group that go out and actually start taking the funds out of people's accounts. And the big gap here is that how long the data can be taken like today, and maybe the cards can be used 3 months from now. So it becomes a difficult investigation when that occurs. So this is just I'm just going to cover off on some of the the legislation that came into effect, and this was really, really good. On January 8th of 2010, this was enacted. This is some of the criminal code amendments that were made: trafficking, possession, and so forth. But the major thing here is that it identified identity theft was an issue. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that here today, if the data is actually been compromised, this is the next step. So laws in Canada with respect to identity theft, I should say more so with privacy, you have the Privacy Act that governs federal agencies like myself, and then you also have PIPEDA, which is the Personal Information Protection and Electronics Documents Act. And that was established in January of 2004, and some provinces also have a provincial component that deals with Privacy Act as well. Some identity documents. How many people here carry their birth certificate with them? Purse, wallet, couple of hands. How about birth certificate, social insurance card? It's kind of the same people, I think. I want you to go home and take them out of your wallets right now. Why? Why do you need them? You know where you were born, right? You know where you were born. You know social insurance number. The only time you need it is to provide to an employer when the time comes that you take taxes off, because that's the way that the government finds out how much your taxes, etc. Social insurance number, right? So if your wallet is lost, or your purse is lost, and somebody takes that data, we're going to see what they can do with that. It's unreal, actually. If you go to, I'll go back here. If you go to, I do presentations with different market segments, so you might have an older generation, and you see 50% of the people have their hands up. There's also, with that clientele as well, there's a card that comes out from the government. It's a black card with a Parliament building. It's the Social Security, if you will, card that has the first generation also had the social insurance numbers across them. They have since removed that from their cards. Health insurance cards, birth certificates, death certificates, passports, pretty self-explanatory. Certificate of citizenship, immigration status, Indian status, employee identification cards. Every place you go to now has a card, might even have your signature on it. Those, if they're missing, can be used, right? Or any similar provincial or federal cards. So what do we do with this stuff? Once we obtain this information, people can access or open bank accounts in your name. They have they have your social insurance card with your driver's license, etc. If they've stolen that as well, they can set up accounts, get loans, credit in your name, and then the only way you really know is if you do an Equifax on yourself or TransUnion request to determine a credit bureau check to determine actually who's looking for you, right? They can transfer bank balances, and we have here apply for loans, make purchases on your behalf, hide criminal activities, which better way to launder money through an account, and then take it out as well, and obtain passports to receive government benefits as well. So what is identity fraud? It's the unauthorized acquisition, possession, or trafficking of personal information. It is the unauthorized use of this information to create fictitious identity or to assume an existing identity. This is done to obtain criminal or financial gain or to conceal criminal activities. Like I said, identity fraud presents a serious threat to public safety. The impact of this fraud is sometimes not felt right off the bat, but it's felt throughout the various segments: government, business, and the public. So that, therefore, just looking at that, if it's affecting everybody, we have to do our part throughout the various segments to minimize or mitigate that. Look at this. This is a fraud impact study in the UK. And as you can see, 38 billion pounds, the fraud loss. Now, that's not just identity theft. What we find with identity theft is that it's really kind of mishmashed into fraud because the information hasn't been collated in a fashion to be able to say that's purely identity theft. But the public sector was a large portion that have been fall victim of it. Private sector and, of course, individuals. So how does that work for Canada? 1 million victims annually, 10 billion in losses that's mass marketing fraud and ID crime. And I think that's very conservative because, like I say, we don't have the mechanisms in place to actually quantify that. In 2008, the dates are kind of a little bit, it's kind of getting old now. 1.7 million victims of ID fraud spent $21 million and 150 million, and let's say 21 million hours and 150 million to resolve problems associated with identity theft. That's a large portion of your time. And I know, speaking to people that have been victims of financial crimes and et cetera, that it takes a long time to get your record back in place with respect to your credit rating and to get your lives together after that. So the message is we keep on going back. We have to use ways to mitigate that risk and try to minimize the effect that it might have on us. Why don't victims report? Embarrassment or shame. You know, why? That's such a silly thing. I didn't mean it to happen to me. I mean, the Microsoft scam, I mean, people are calling you up and saying you got a virus on your computer. I mean, how? You guys are all mostly tech people here. How do you know? I mean, how do they know that you have you've been victimized on your computer? I mean, or that you have a virus? I mean, but that's things that happen. Feel law enforcement won't do anything, that's our issue. Feel the courts won't punish. They sometimes just report to a bank or the credit union or credit agency. And really, a lot of times they don't know that they've been victimized. As I mentioned in the case with the debit card skimming, cards can be skimmed today, the actual fraud occurs later on. Sometimes people feel that they have committed a crime themselves by allowing it to occur. So I guess where we go is, what can we as consumers do to minimize the frauds? Theft of your identity can occur at various points. Internet, telephone, fax, or through the mail. I guess it ends up being is we always have to be wary of what information we're giving to people and why. Do they require it? Do they require your social insurance number? Do they require your driver's license? I think it's everybody's role to be vigilant in protecting this data, because it's your data. Retailers become the ultimate target of identity fraud since the fraudulent business transactions are completed by unsuspecting individuals. What we're saying here is to learn and use safety measures to minimize the chance of becoming a victim. Be wary of unsolicited emails. I suppose you've talked about that already here today. Or mail, telephone calls, trying to extract personal or financial information. The banks aren't going to contact you via email to ask for this information. They're not going to be calling you up asking for this information. They have all that information. If you feel if somebody contacts you and they're purporting to be somebody, call whoever you are. I'm calling from the Bank of Montreal and I'm here to ask you about a special offer. Contact them. Say, oh, thanks very much, I'll call you back. And this is the one here. Ask yourself if you need all the identity documents in your wallet. We want to minimize that risk. Eh? Remove any cards that you don't need and don't share them with anybody. Store them in a safe place. Someone with your social insurance card or birth certificate can pretend to be you and actually use that data again, as I mentioned before, with loans. We talk about for payment card, debit card, is periodically check your credit reports, your bank and credit card statements, and report any irregularities as soon as you can. Don't lose sight of your card when you're doing a transaction. I don't know if you've gone to like Superstore, Sobeys recently. For the last 2 years or so, they have these little stations and they're locked in, And that's to mitigate their risk. They don't want anything to do with it. Imagine the bad publicity associated with, I went to the store, bought some items, and now somebody just took a bunch of cash out of my account. It happened at this Sobeys, at this location. That's bad press. And so what they've done to mitigate that is they've had these stations where the point-of-sale terminals are placed, and they're locked down. So anybody, the main way that people were committing this fraud, it was that they were stealing the point-of-sale terminals, doctored them up with pinhole cameras and additional readers, and actually obtaining the data from the machine at the same time it was going in. So the Sobeys store, if you will, was the host of the fraud, right? And so what they've done is they've mitigated that risk by locking down these. It'd take you half an hour, 45 minutes to try to get a point-of-sale terminal off a machine at either of those places. So that's the type of thing that we have to think about. Think about the work process that we have and try to break it down into steps that are manageable, and we try to mitigate that risk. Well, this is what we say to people as well: shred personal and financial information. It's pretty self-explanatory. Protect your mail, both incoming and outgoing. If you're unable to pick up your mail, have someone pick it up for you. And of course, if you think you might have been a victim of identity fraud, act immediately. Report the incident to the appropriate organization, police agency of jurisdiction. Notify creditors and financial institutions immediately, and file a report with your local police. Cancel your credit cards. Check your credit file with the credit bureau. That's Equifax, Trans-Canada Union. We're talking about organizational risk assessment. Some of the things that I guess as an organization, if we're talking more so with respect to businesses, etc., we have to define the information privacy principles that are associated with that organization. We want to establish objectives, what you want to do, identify and assess the risks of not meeting the objectives, and identify and implement control measures to change. Then lastly, we want to assess the effectiveness of these control measures. And this is a very fluent system, this risk assessment. We want to continue to go back and to determine how well it's working. So of course, the safeguarding of information, there's physical measures, alarms, locking cabinets, restricting access to certain places. Of course, the technological measures you guys have spoken to at length, I'm sure, today. And of course, the organizational controls, clearances, limiting access to need to know, staff training and confidentiality agreements. What we always have to think about is, how sensitive is the information to determine how we're going to deal with protecting the information. What type of information is there, the amount of information, how it is being stored, if it's done by paper or electronically, and the type of storage that you have. In summary, private companies, public organizations, and end users all have a stake in minimizing the effects of identity theft. It's a very serious issue. I think it's something that obviously the government has taken great pains to try to change the way that we enforce the law with respect to identity theft. It's a major issue, and it gets back to consumer confidence and public safety. So if we can, by practicing risk management techniques and having a clear mandate with respect to the use, storage, and dissemination of information, identity theft can be minimized. And that's what we're trying to do. I don't think it's ever going to be an issue. I don't think there's ever going to be a time that we're going to have secure systems for everything. But what we want to do is to minimize the amount of exposure that both companies, organizations have with respect to this very important thing, identity theft. That's all I had for today. Is there any questions that are out there? Feel free to ask any questions with respect to this information. I think it's really important. I think having seminars like this is a really good step in trying to minimize that gap with respect to it. Looking back at it like 10 years ago, how people stored information, where it was, what information was provided, this was never an issue. But I think now it's becoming more of an issue, and I think it's great that John and his colleagues have come together to put this all together. I think it's very important, and I applaud you all for coming, thinking it's a major concern, and actually listening to suggestions with respect to it. Any questions there at all? Sir? Okay. Yeah, okay. It's very, he's asked a bunch of questions there, but I'll try to paraphrase for him. Gentleman asked here if, how do they go about, once they have the data, to actually commit a fraud with respect to credit cards, with respect to setting up bank accounts. And I'll start with the setting up the bank accounts first. If, for example, you lose your wallet and you had your social insurance card in it, and you have your driver's license. Well, your driver's license get doctored up and put your face on it if you're the perpetrator. Put your face on the item, laminated, and there you go. You have that information. You can change that. Social insurance card is whatever it is. So you're assuming that person's name. So they doctor up the ID, the picture ID with the social insurance card, and not too much more gets done. With a bank, what they do is they do credit bureau checks to determine who you are, and that would all marry up and say, oh yeah, here's a picture, we had his date of birth, his driver's license, and then of course the social insurance card. You assume the other person's identity, you have credit in their name. That's the first question. Second question with respect to credit cards, etc. Well, things have been done in the last little bit. 2009, chips came into effect, which are very, very more secure. They're encrypted messages all the time, rather than the simple magnetic stripe information. So the chip information is encrypted, the information, of course you also have to have a password associated with that chip. And so that is a little bit more, it's more tricky, but just dealing with the magnetic stripe in itself, what they do is they put an additional reader on a machine, and then that data is kept. If I have your card, and going back 2 years ago, I could have went in, bought some items, signed a thing, that was it. As long as my signature was similar to what was in the back. How many people here purchase something at a store and people actually look at the back at your signature in the back of the credit card? Not very often. Not very often. I'm talking probably 10%. Yeah. But magnetic stripe, or the chip technology has been really good because you have a password associated with that encrypted message when it goes out. So that's been really, really helpful. Great questions. Anybody else? Well, thanks for inviting me here today. Oh, John.
Sorry, I have one question. I've often heard that as soon as somebody has a social insurance number, like even if they're a child, that false identities can be built up and loans taken out in their name. I don't know how much that goes on or whether you've run into it, but do you want to comment
Sure.
on that?
Yeah. Well, I'll be truthful. Here in Atlantic Canada, we don't, we're more of a trusting type of environment. And that does, it does occur, but not necessarily in these parts for the most part. It has happened. I've seen it not with respect to as soon as you're born now, you can apply for a social insurance card. There's been times when people have actually been deceased and people have assumed their identity. We take down from the time to time an operation a year, maybe every 2 years, here in Atlantic Canada with respect to people making false identification. So obviously there's a market for that. And there's people, they're called account takeovers when they do that. And it does, I get reports across the country, and I would say about 4 or 5 a day is either payment skimming or account takeovers. Hopefully I answered your question, John. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, it's lady in the back? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, her question was her husband just received a new PayPass payment card, and or credit card or payment? Debit. I haven't had that much exposure with respect to those. I'm not quite sure if is it using flash technology? Don't know. Yeah. Yeah, that's the flash technology. The first generation of that stuff wasn't that good, but it's coming along. And I don't know how it works with respect to, is there a dollar amount that, so it can't be over a certain dollar amount, otherwise you have to use your normal process? Is that what it is? 200, okay. Yeah. Well, they're eating that. The payment card partners are eating that. And it's just the same thing with respect to the new chip cards with respect to the credit card. It's the same thing. If it's below a certain amount, they don't even get you to sign. That's it. You just put your PIN in. That's it. Gone. No signing. And that's the same type of thing. But to be truthful, I really don't know the answer to your question with respect to that. I don't know the security associated with those flashcards. I know they've enhanced the security associated with them in the last little year, I would say, and they are a lot better than what they were at first. Yeah. John?
It's a comment, I guess, but you might want to comment on it. We often hear that we should regularly get credit checks, not reports, get credit checks, like from TransUnion.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if anybody here knew, but we're quite lucky because if we live in this vicinity, TransUnion office is just down the road slightly. So, like, I recommend people going in person.
Yeah.
Avoids sending all that personal information one direction to get the report back. Anyway, what do you think about that, and also the frequency of getting a credit check?
Yeah, I mean, I have on the screen here are some websites that are useful. Equifax and, of course, TransUnion Canada, which are our two main credit bureaus in Canada. And if you are able to, I'd do it as many times as you want. I mean, twice a year, I mean, we don't want to be into a paranoid state, but if you did it once a year, I think it's better than doing it not at all. If you go in yourself to any of those places there, Equifax or TransUnion, they'll provide that information for free to you. If somebody else asks for it, then there's a charge associated with it. It's really good because you see, it'll show who's been checking, Jane Doe, who's been checking on you, and it's associated with your social insurance card or social insurance number and your name. And so, if in fact that somebody's been checking to see what kind of credit rating you have, and it's at Leon's, and you haven't been in Leon's for 10 years, there might be an issue. So there's things that you can do you can put identifiers on your credit rating, credit bureau check that as soon as you get picked up, it gets binged basically that identifier identity theft has occurred on this account. Yep. Yes, ma'am. Oh, is that right? Oh, that's yeah. Yeah, normally what happens. I tell you, when they start the process is called harvesting of the accounts. They'll target a bank machine or a point of sale terminal, and they'll target that point of sale terminal or bank machine for a certain period of time. They'll harvest the information, and for that you need both the magnetic stripe information and the password. And they'll harvest that information for a certain period of time, depending on how long they're in town or etc. And then they either go back and normally what they do is they'll do the spends all at once. So I find that kind of unusual. And it's just, I mean, for example, I was provided with it was a place in BC actually, over a 6-month period. It was a point of sale terminal at a coffee house, not a Starbucks, mind you, but it was a coffee house, tea house in an area. And over a 6-month period, the tea house was a host, if you will, of this crime. So magnetic stripe information, whoever came in and used the point of sale terminal, the funds were being placed for whatever purchase that you've made to the the tea house. However, they were also tapping that information. They were holding on to that information. So the people that had, the suspects had infiltrated the system. So the tea house was a host, if you will. Well, they did that for a 6-month period, the investigation showed. And it just so happens that in about 40 minutes on a certain day of the year, 6 months down the road, in both Montreal and Toronto at one time, the spends occurred. And we're talking like $600,000 in 40 minutes. So it's a lucrative thing. It's organized crime that's doing it. And so the harvesting occurred at one location, and then the spends occurred at a different location within Canada on a given time. Now, there's virtual systems that actually pick up some of this stuff. However, there was a lot of attempts, and that's what they got off with at the end of the day. So it's very lucrative. Yeah, sir? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, it's the better document, if you will, would be the card, but the social insurance number itself is very useful as well. They would have to get some picture ID as well to marry up with your card to be able to say that this is what I have, and this is like to be able to use it for the fraud down the road. That's why anything that comes from the government, like you want to, like your taxes, shred that stuff after 7 years. Anything that has your social insurance number, get rid of it, right? Ma'am? Oh. Oh, you'd have a lot of nice, good conversation. You should be up here. No? Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I don't know if everybody heard it, especially people on the other side, but a lady here mentioned that she was an immigration officer, I believe, in Toronto, and that she's looking for accountability with respect to information. Like, if you're in a certain business, how do you deal with your information, and how would you deal with it in another business as well, as a government agency, et cetera? And I think it's a really good question, and I think we have to report back to right here, Privacy Act. And the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, that's mostly Privacy Act stuff, as well as PIPEDA. If it's a provincial government agency that doesn't have a law in the certain province that you're in, you're dealing with PIPEDA. Yeah. Ma'am. Oh, I got two here. Lady in pink.
Just supplementary to her comment.
Yes.
Federally, provincially, municipally, and in the mush sector in Nova Scotia, every organization, every public body has somebody appointed to address access and privacy.
Yeah, information officer.
Good information officer.
Yeah.
Information access and privacy officer, whatever.
Yeah.
So that would be the person that she would talk to in that given organization.
Yeah, set the standard for that organization. That's what we're talking about with privacy, if you will, strategy for your office. Yeah, ma'am, somebody over right here. Yeah.
Mine was just a statement a little on the lighter side. I find it easy to avoid credit card fraud by keeping my credit cards maxed.
Oh well, geez, I don't know. Well, whatever works for you, I guess. Yeah. I don't know how you can answer that. You dumbfounded me. But yeah, that's a great. Whatever strategies work for you. In the back. What's that? Sorry? Oh, sorry about that. She said that the strategy she uses with respect to identity theft is that she likes to max out her credit cards, and so it's not an issue for her. Is that roughly? I think she's just being a little facetious there, but that was nice. It kind of lightened it up some. Yeah. Any other questions, guys, before I go? Thanks for the time. Bye now.
Thank you, Sergeant Murdoch. On behalf of Dalhousie University, we really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.